This episode is sponsored by Audible. Get a free audiobook of your choice that you get to keep with their free trial. You can learn more at lutherancartographer.com/audible. The Lutheran Cartographer, Episode 80. Welcome to the Lutheran Cartographer, the podcast where we explore what it's like to be Lutheran in different places. I'm your host, Nicholas Weber. Today we're going to Chestertown, Maryland to talk to Pastor Jim Driskell. He is the pastor of Trinity Lutheran Church there in Chestertown. Pastor Driskell, welcome to the show.
Nicholas, good morning. How are you?
Doing well. Today we're in Chestertown. Help orient us. Where is that in Maryland?
Chestertown is on what is called the eastern shore of Maryland. Now, that eastern shore is in respect to the Chesapeake Bay, okay? It doesn't abut the Atlantic Ocean. Delaware's on the other side of us. You have to drive through Delaware to get to the Atlantic Ocean from here. When you hear somebody say the eastern shore, that means the eastern shore of the Chesapeake Bay. Western shore of Chesapeake Bay is where the main part of Maryland is, Pennsylvania is, Virginia. And just to give you even more of an idea, the bridge that you would cross in order to get across the bay to get on this side, the Chesapeake Bay Bridge, is almost right in the middle between Baltimore and Washington. So you would drive pretty much down to 95, probably down to the Bay Bridge. You'd be halfway down to Washington from there, drive across the Bay Bridge, take a left from there, and it's about probably 45 minutes north of the Bay Bridge. So it's right on the Chesapeake. And just to give you more of an idea, when this was colonized, this little town here was considered to be a crown colony. This was expected to be one of the main ports. And there's still a British custom house that was built in 1730, I think, that you can go into, and it's been preserved, and it's really, really neat to look at. But it's, those days ended about mid-1800s, and Baltimore has become the main shipping port for this area.
I see.
A lot of Lutherans came in through Baltimore.
Oh, okay. Well, let's talk more about that in a little bit. Before we do, I'd like to hear a little bit more about you and how you came to where you've lived before and how you came to Chestertown.
Sure. Town.
Chestertown. Yes. Okay.
I had to get that beaten in my head for a year. My wife and I are from the Boston area. It's pretty much where we both grew up, and we left there in 2005. So we lived there pretty much all our lives. And it's as I was saying to you, it's Chestertown is so different from the rest of the East Coast of Massachusetts. I'm very used to. From business or military, traveling the East Coast of Massachusetts, from Boston down to Richmond, Alexandria, and I never even realized this was here. And the only reason I do triathlons, and there was a triathlon right in this area. And before I even knew anything about what was going on. So I just did the race. I just picked it arbitrarily, came over, did the race, came back. So when the church called me to do an interview and I came down here, I started looking around. I'm going, I've been here before. And so it's almost kind of weird, Providence. I'm a weird third career kind of guy. I spent 20 years in corporate finance. I started with Chase Manhattan. I worked for Motorola. Worked for Fleet National Bank. I worked for the Massachusetts State Treasurer. And at the same time, I was in the military reserve, Coast Guard Reserve. All told, I spent 29 years in the Coast Guard. Needless to say, the last 4 years of that was on active duty with pretty much everybody else. And being on active duty during the what was called the Global War on Terror, got to do some really interesting stuff, and retired from that. And the corporate world isn't always very kind to people who serving the military. So after 4 years of being out of that loop, it was almost kind of again, it was almost kind of ordained that from there that the corporate door was being closed and the ministry door was being swung wide open. And through a bunch of just kind of weird circumstances, 2005, we ended up packing up our selling our house of 20 years and packing up our stuff. We raised our three children there, and my wife Marge and I. And it's really tough leaving a home after 20 years of raising your your children there in many respects. And but it really was. It was almost crazy how smoothly it went. How it was like, yeah, now keep going, keep going. So the Holy Spirit was just kind of the wind at my back, pretty much moving me along, doing what He wanted to do. But yeah, in the Coast Guard, I was mostly at a boat station. So I did a lot of search and rescue. Even as reserves, you have to fit in. You have to be operational. You have to be a part of the crew. More so, actually, they expect a little more because you've been there so long. Regular kind of come and go. And so I got to do a lot of the search and rescue, a lot of law enforcement, just kind of the other foreign protection, not foreign, dignitary protection, working with Secret Service and local police, just kind of a lot of stuff like that. Right around the time, just before 9/11, about 1999, I moved into a Naval Coastal Warfare Unit, which is that's a unit that they were beginning to different kind of forms of units they were organizing in order to be more proactive about protecting American shipping interest and Allied interest. That was when the coal had gotten blown up. And so they wanted to put in place different types of units to make sure that didn't happen. So when I got activated, that was the unit I was in. I was deployed down to Puerto Rico to do some force protection stuff with the Navy down there. And then we went to Spain for about 10 weeks, and we did force protection over there for a lot of big Navy ships and Army, Marine exercises that were going on inland from where we were in Spain.
Yeah, that sounds like a really interesting past and vocation. I want to step back for just a second and kind of return to Chestertown and talk about the contrast that you see between the culture in Boston and the culture there. What are some of the major differences you've seen?
Well, to give you a perspective in numbers, it's very rural. The town that we're at here, Chestertown, people have told me different population. Let's just freeze the population of the town itself is about 10,000 people. The city I grew up in outside of Boston's 100,000 people. The high school I went to was 6,000 students. Probably there aren't really that many people in the town of Chestertown. The county is 30,000 people. It's a little more populated south from here because it has become more of a bedroom community to Baltimore and DC and those areas down there. I'll tell you what, man, when things get stuck on the Bay Bridge, there's a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth, shall we say. You know what I'm saying? It makes for the Bay Bridge is somewhere about 2 miles long. I remember one time I spent 2 hours right in the middle of the day trying to get across the bridge from this side to go to Baltimore. So, it's very, I won't say it's isolated, but it's definite. Let me put it this way. I got to go 45 minutes to get a double Whopper. Okay. You got to go an hour to get to Walmart. All right. It's probably done a lot for my weight program because I don't eat a lot of, but on the other hand, it's a really, really nice little community. It's becoming more of a retirement community. The median age here is going up because people are retiring here. And there's a lot of real potential here. People are kind of feeling the loss of younger people. But to be frank, there's a limited amount of opportunity here for younger people just starting families. Let me put it that way. It's just not really that close. Most of the families really don't want to have to commute. DC's not quite 2 hours from here, maybe an hour and a half from here. Baltimore about the same, and that's without traffic. That's going straight through. Dover, Delaware is about an hour from here. All the different parts of Delaware are essentially an hour. There's stuff to do in Delaware, but it's cheaper to live in Delaware. So people are going to work in Delaware, they're going to live in Delaware, that kind of thing. So it's very agricultural here. I'm still trying to reconcile having a wheat field in my backyard and a cornfield across the street from me in my front yard, and on the sides of us. Like you said, I never even knew they grew wheat on the East Coast until we moved here. One of the families in the church has one of the largest pork, hog raising, pig raising operations facilities on the East Coast. So there's not a lot of livestock raising, but there is, enough. There's people who raise chickens. There's people who mostly cattle farming. A lot of people raise horses here. It's very flat. My mother's from Western Kansas, so I've been to Western Kansas, been through Kansas a couple of times, and it's not quite as flat as Kansas, and there's a lot more vegetation, a lot more trees, a lot, there is that difference, but it's still flat. I mean, you can go miles and not even hit a good hill. Like you said, I do triathlons, and you got to really look here just to kind of get a few places where you can kind of do some climbs on your bicycle to get, a really good work. But it's also nice because you can just get down and just go straight, really run or bike. And literally that same triathlon I do passes right in front of the house we live in now. So it's really pretty neat. I go do my swim workouts in the Chesapeake at least once a week. And so I always tell people here, it's like, seriously, you just have just the perfect location. We had one time, the first winter we were here, where it had snowed Saturday night, and it was basically about maybe 2 inches of snow, So I'm just outside kind of dusting everything off, and the president of the congregation calls me up and he says, "Well, we're not having worship today, right?" And I'm like, "Okay." Did the furnace blow up? Is there a hole in the ceiling or something? And I was not being a wise guy. I just didn't I was sure there was some kind of casualty. He said, "Well, no, we just don't have worship." And I'm saying, like, "Well, can you tell me why?" And he said, "Well, it snowed." And I was like, help me out here a little. And, "Oh, well, we don't have worship when it snows." I said, "Look, dude, I'm from Boston, okay? Yeah, one year we got 110 inches of snow, all right? I'm not going to cancel worship 2 inches of snow, okay? I'll be there. Whoever else shows up, great, So we had about 17 people. That's kind of very, very temperate. It really doesn't get that hot and humid in the summer, really doesn't get that cold in the winter. Just very, very, real mild, not that humid. You would think being this close to DC, it'd be, and Norfolk, Tidewater, that kind of area. It's about 3 hours north of the Tidewater area in Virginia. And, you would think it would be just really brutally humid, and it's not. It's just primo. So, I always tell people, it's like, you got the sweet spot here. You got the crabs and all the fish in the Chesapeake. You got all the corn and the wheat around you. The weather is just right. I mean, so you can really understand why a lot of people would want to retire to here. It just is right in that sweet spot. So.
Absolutely. So it sounds like we've already covered a lot of what I expect to hear from you when I say, what are some of the best things about the area? We've talked about the temperate weather, the slower pace, the more rural orientation. Are there other things that you would want to say about the best things about
Oh yeah.
Chestertown?
Oh yeah, I mean, really, there is. Look, the only downside is you got to go 45 minutes to get a double Whopper. Okay, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or if you got to go an hour to go, I can't even remember the last time I was in a department store. I mean, it's a very historic area. When they had the bicentennial for the War of 1812. There was a lot of stuff going on here. I've only been here 3 years, so I wasn't here to see that, but I know of it. There's a battlefield from that war that's about 3 miles east from my house. The commander of the British forces was Peter Parker. So apparently Spider-Man was here back in 1814 fighting the Americans. So it's very historic. Like I said, it was a crown seaport during the. They have a tea party here, which kind of freaked me out. But it was basically for the same reason that they had the Tea Party in Boston. That was a protest against the taxes, and every year right around this time, those things have been canceled because of what's the stuff going on. But right around this time every year, normally they have a reenactment of the Tea Party. They have a couple of down at the pier. They have a couple of old vessels down there. There's real nice beaches around here, but it really is kind of it's really kind of a secret. Nobody really knows about it, which in a lot of ways, okay, fine. Nobody else wants to come here. I'm good with it, except I'd like to have a lot more people in worship, obviously. So just a real lot of upside. There are a lot of nice places to stay if you want to visit. A lot of nice places to eat. When I say a lot, not, but the places that are here, you get great Italian food. We're renting a house from the guy who owns the Italian restaurant here, Luisa's. And really, I'm from the Boston area, okay? I mean, that is real Italian food. And I'll tell you, it's the Luisa's is right up there with that. Great calamari, great chicken parm, all that kind of stuff. I can't remember the other places, but sorry, good seafood. There's good seafood places around here. Obviously, crab is Chesapeake Bay crab is a big hot item, and you can get a lot of places around here for that. So really, there is just a lot of upside here. There's still some remnants of antebellum era. There are different plantations, a couple of different plantations. In fact, I run by one in the morning, and it's still pretty much the land's been developed, but the plantation itself looks pretty much like it would have back in 1860. So a lot of those kinds of different things to see. But again, you're not going to have to contend with a crowd. If you get there, you'll pretty much be there. Handful of other people and relax and enjoy kind of thing.
Absolutely. Let's take a moment to thank our sponsor. If you enjoy listening to audio and to the Lutheran Cartographer, you will also enjoy Audible. It's a service from Amazon that gets you a audiobook of your choice every month, and you can also try out this service for free for 30 days that comes with a free audiobook that you get to keep even if you decide not to continue with their service. Check it out at lutherancartographer.com/audible. If you're looking for a book to explore this month, I would recommend checking out Pastor Will Wheaton's Thank, Praise, Serve, and Obey, Recovering the Joys of Piety. It's a book about Lutheran piety, not pietism, and it was a great blessing to me as I listened to it on my trip out to Missouri. So check it out at lutherancartographer.com/audible. Let's get back to our guest. Let's talk about the flip side. What are some of the challenges about being in the area?
Well, like I said, any place you have to go 45 minutes to get a double Whopper, I mean, that's very upsetting. But
Tragic, really.
I survived for 3 years, so I guess I'll keep going, but I mean, on the upside, there's a lot of great places, a lot of good food, weaning me off bad stuff and getting me onto good seafood. And I got to say, it's not quite Boston area seafood, but it's still very good. Okay, I mean, on a scale of 10, Boston being 10, Chestertown's like 8.5. So we'll go from there. Being in the Coast Guard, let's face it, I had a lot of access to lobster and all that kind of thing. So I mean, it is kind of remote, and when I say that, I don't mean out in the mountains or something like that, but I mean it is pretty much anything, you know, more than you got to go about an hour to get to. You have to go to either Dover, Delaware, or Middletown, Delaware. Centerville is about 30 minutes from here. They have a little more, but again, not a whole lot. You can go down to Easton, which is kind of almost an hour, and that's pretty developed down there. Healthcare is a little remote. My wife had a stroke 2 years ago, and so the logistics of getting her into the hospital, and they got her there and they took care of her. It's like a critical care facility, and they got her stabilized, they got her taken care of, and they got her airlifted to Baltimore. But being from an area where I'm maybe 40 minutes from some of the best hospitals in the world, but obviously Johns Hopkins is here, University of Maryland is right in Baltimore too. So that is kind of a trade-off there a little. The folks that are at the local facility here are great. They do a great job, but there is that issue where there's only so much they can do, and then they got to move you to some place in Delaware or Baltimore for much more specialized. So if I would pick on anything, those would be the only ones. And again, those are extreme kind of situations. For pretty much anything you'd want to do day to day for a living, you really there's just you really it would be a great place for folks to retire to, or it'd be a great place. A lot of people who are kind of mid-career, late career also live here because it's not it, they feel it's worth it to commute from here to DC because the lifestyle here is a lot more quiet, and the prices on the other side of the bay, prices here are not cheap, not by any stretch of the imagination. But on the other side of the bay, the closer you get to DC, they're just, mind numbing. And that's from somebody who, moved out of the Boston area. It is very expensive to live on the Western Shore. So, in that respect, it is less expensive to live here. It's not cheap, but it is less expensive to live here. So if you wanted to commute to DC, it's kind of a trade-off. Costs are less, but, the commuting's more. 6 and 1.
Yeah. Well, let's move on and talk about what it's like to be Lutheran there. You mentioned earlier the German immigrants. What's the history of Lutheranism in the area, and are Lutherans known if you ask the average person on the street?
Well, okay, I give you a couple of perspectives because my first call was to a church in York, Pennsylvania. And York, Pennsylvania is about a 40-mile straight shot from Baltimore north. And the church there was built in the 1870s. Huge cathedral church right in the middle of it. It was built in order to be the tallest structure in York at the time. And a lot of German immigrants were moved from Baltimore up to there because York was very German. It was William Penn went to Germany to bring people back to populate Pennsylvania because they wanted to develop that area. I'm kind of related to the Adams family, John Quincy Adams. John Adams was in New York when they moved the Continental Congress there, and he did not like York because it was dirty and everybody spoke German. Nobody spoke English. So I didn't share that a lot with people in York while I was there. That I was related, but just to kind of give you an idea. But yeah, Baltimore itself, there are a lot of real old. In fact, there's still one church in Baltimore that still does a lot of German services. Even in York, we tried to do at least one Christmas service in German, one Easter service in German. But you got to remember the history of Maryland. The history of Maryland was that this was a land grant to a Roman Catholic nobleman who was given the land grant as a intentional, basically refuge for Roman Catholics in the British Empire. The British Empire was not real friendly to Roman Catholics, so this was a place where Roman Catholics could go and really express freedom of religion. But the reality was it was still an English colony. So needless to say, the Anglican Church was very prominent. And on the Eastern Shore, the Anglican Church is very prominent. There really isn't a whole lot of Roman Catholic presence on the Eastern Shore, but there's some very old, very venerable Anglican churches on the shore. In fact, there's one where I've done a couple of funerals or interments at that. The cemetery has they're buried there people who fought in every single war dating back to the French and Indian War. So it again gives you a very, very historic. The congregation, the parish there obviously goes back at least to the French and Indian War. There's another congregation that's closer to where I live that also goes back to the early mid 1700s. So there is kind of this, and I'm not even really sure that there really is as much presence of Roman Catholic presence now as there was. I know there still is, but back in the day, that was what it was intended for, and. So to be Lutheran here, in terms of that, needless to say, you're kind of in that mix. You're at the lower end of that mix because most people, again, would think of it more in terms of being Anglican and Roman Catholic. But it is very, Baltimore itself, as I said, has some very prominent Lutheran churches there. And there's still, as I said, one that still has a lot of speaks German a lot. So a lot of history in terms of that. Muhlenberger immigrated to the United States through Baltimore up to Pennsylvania. So this whole area, especially in terms of the Eastern Coast, not so much in terms of LCMS, but in terms of Lutheran, it has a very deep history. In fact, the church right around the corner where I was in York was it's the oldest Lutheran church west of the Susquehanna River. And that was dedicated by Muhlenberg, I think, like back in 1740, something like that. So the area in general, yes, it's Lutheran churches is prominently known. Nothing like in Missouri or Wisconsin or Texas or those places. Not even close to that. Illinois. Let's face it. If Illinois, Minnesota, Missouri slid off, the LCMS would almost be cut in half. So, I mean, it's nowhere near to that extent. And the history of the Lutheran Church here is predominantly what was called the Pennsylvania Ministerium, which is the root of the what is now the ELCA. The church I was at was built in 1870 in York. And so that it was always unabashedly LCMS. And the church here, relatively speaking, is a lot newer. It was founded as a mission church in about 1930. So it is interesting that it was kind of founded in, right at the beginning of the Depression. Being a rural agricultural community, my sense is, and I haven't seen a whole lot about it, but my sense is that there wasn't that kind of, real desperate poverty. There was a lot here. People could live. People were still going to grow wheat and corn. They were still going to go out and fish in the Chesapeake. So there was, and then, raise farm animals. So there was accessibility, in terms of eating and building things, but in terms of the, we'll say the nicer things in life, like, new clothes and new shoes or, that kind of stuff. But again, the climate here is so temperate that it wasn't like you had people sitting out in the middle of fields in 95-degree weather or, being hovered away because, there was a foot of snow on the ground or anything. It does snow here. It does get cold, but nothing like New England. So I mean, it's kind of in that area where the conditions never got bad. And so, when the church was established here as a mission church, it started on a pretty, decent footing. But again, the populations never really changed since the American Revolution. So it's never really been very well populated. Like you said, the county is 30,000. And I'll tell you, my part of the city I grew up in was probably about 30,000, and we were, very urban. I won't say we were packed in, but, it was very urban.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, what you would think
very
of as
dense, right?
urban. Exactly.
Yeah.
Eastern urban.
Okay. Well, let's go on. I want to make sure that we have the time to get to a few of our last questions. And I understand that for your part, your family is mostly grown and gone. But what do you think it's like for your parishioners to raise children there in Chestertown?
I mean, it really is very nice. And if you own a family farm or, you have a business or you do the commute or something like that, and kids are growing up here, taking over the family farm. And, it's not farming like you would see in Kansas, or it's not huge, it's not massive, but it's still more than enough to support a family, and in this day and age, uh, raising agriculture, that kind of thing, it's being done on a lot less land, we're feeding a lot more people and using a lot less land. And so, in terms of that, farming can be done with enough in order to, raise a family, have a nice family life, have a nice life, and not really have to, you don't have to work crazy, silly hours, in order to accomplish that. I'm not encouraging people to come out and buy a farm. I'm not even sure you can anymore. It's, I don't know, maybe you can. And there are a few places that are industry here. So, I mean, it is a nice place for kids because they really can. You don't have to go far. You can find a place to learn how to horseback ride. There are beaches. I can, drive pretty easily down to a beach. So, I mean, during the summer, there's not a lot the kids can do, but there is stuff you can do, maybe there's not a lot of supervised activity, but there's still a lot of stuff to do, for kids. You want to go out and take a hike, you want to go through, different parts. There's historic parts, the town. The town has, a lot of historic landmarks. And really, I haven't, it's small area wise. It's probably maybe 4 square miles. But packed in there, it still very much reminds you of colonial America. There's a lot of stuff in there. There's one boat that's there that dates back to the 1740s. It's a replica of a boat that brought Swedish settlers into the area. Delaware was very settled by a lot of Swedish immigrants coming over from Sweden. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff. You can go over to the battlefield that's near where I live. There's a couple other battlefield areas that you can go and look at. It's not much there, but you just take it in. It's really kind of nice. The school system here is really, really good. It's certainly not dense. You know, if you send your kids to school here, there's gonna be a real nice ratio of teachers to students, and they got great teachers. One of the members of the congregation here is the former track coach of the high school, and very well known in the area. Everybody knows Denny, and really great. He's president of the congregation, great leader. He really is. Really, he was a he was an elite track athlete at Eastern Michigan University back in his time. He went from there to being a Marine lieutenant for 4 years, and so I mean, there's that kind of environment. He's the science teacher there. Every year, he in the public schools, he has kind of a little planetarium, and he does a show in there during Christmas. And he, gives an overview of the sky and stuff, but then he kind of focuses on the Star of Bethlehem and the night sky when Jesus was.
Yeah, let's move on. I want to make sure that we have time to get to what your favorite things in the area are, and I'm gonna do something a little difficult. And this is kind of like picking your favorite hymn. But what would you say two places to eat maybe in the area and two things to do?
I do triathlons, like you said, so I mean, I get the chance to get on my bike and go for miles, and I don't have to deal with congestion. I don't have to deal with people. I can just, I can drive down to where I go swimming on my bike. It's about 10 miles down, 10 miles back. I can go out and run again. I'm not putting up with congestion or population. It was a little funny, when we were all supposed to wear face masks, even when you run, you have to go wear a face mask. And I'm like, if I run into two people in the whole time that I do my run, about an hour to run, I'd be lucky, I mean, that's ridiculous. Don't get me started on that whole thing. But anyways, so I mean, you have the opportunity to do those kind of things. Washington College is literally, we're at the intersection to Washington College. Washington College was the first college chartered in the United States after the American Revolution. It was chartered by George Washington. He signed the charter. He was there. He was here at the dedication of the college. He helped dedicate the college. So there still is that historic element, and they certainly emphasize that. And it's really neat to be right across the street and kind of be more part of that culture. So I mean, I don't know if I would say that there's a go-to thing that I would do here all the time. I'm not sure. It's sort of like you got to kind of figure out where you're at that day and what you feel like doing. And so again, there's certainly things here to do, but it's just not on the same scale as living outside of Boston or that kind of thing. If you get real, you can certainly drive to DC. It's not that big a deal to get to DC. If you want to see the Red Sox and the Orioles, it's not a big deal to get across the bridge, get to Camden Yards. It's not that far at all. Maybe hour 20, something like that. Pretty much Boston during rush hour, 25 miles, it takes an hour and a half to get in the Fenway, go figure, right? But, so I mean, Annapolis is right at the other side of the bridge. So you can go down and see the Naval Academy from there and all the stuff. Another very historic, very You can go to the chapel there, and that's where John Paul Jones is buried. And the chapel is always playing Eternal Father, Strong to Save. And that's the real Navy hymn, not Anchors Aweigh, Eternal Father. Just a lot of history. It is laid back, and a lot of times a little too laid back for me. I'm a little, let's go. So that kind of rubs people wrong way, but sorry. But
learning to live at a slower pace of life kind of thing.
Yeah, I guess we're winding down a little, but I got a long way to go. I'm not the slower pace kind of life, so I go out and cause trouble and find things to. So anyway,
Nice. All right.
Sort of the Ron method of ministry: go throw a bomb, and then but
and see what happens. All right.
yeah.
Well, Pastor Driskell, as we start to close out the podcast, I want to make sure to give you the opportunity to point our listeners where you'd like. Your church's website, places to follow you online.
Yep.
Where would you like to point our listeners?
I'm stupid. I forgot to I knew I forgot one thing to do. We have a Facebook page. Our website's on the Facebook page. The website is a little cryptic, and I give it to you wrong, you're going to end up in who knows where. I don't want you to do that.
Yeah, it looks like your church's website is Trinity Lutheran, all one word, -chestertown.org.
Thank you for having looked that up.
Certainly. Yeah, and dear listener, you can find links to that on the show notes page for this episode, which is going to be lutherancartographer.com/80. Is there anything else that the listeners should know about?
Like you said, we've lived here 3 years now, 3 years this month, and we've had a family situation with my wife's condition, but nonetheless, it's still been a great place. The folks here are really great, really supportive. I think that if you come down, you want to check out the church here. It's fairly modest in appearance, but that can be a little deceiving. We've started to do some really great stuff here, and really looking forward to getting past all the COVID and all the other conditions and situations, and getting our feet on the ground and really starting to get some traction and get going, and getting past a lot of distractions. It's just been, oh man, just very frustrating.
Yeah, this last year and a quarter has been pretty brutal.
Yeah, and I mean, my wife's condition is settled a lot too. So I'm in a position now where, we've set a lot of foundation to start to get going again. So that's what we're looking to do in the next by the fall, is to really get things ramped up and get going, and put the past behind.
Absolutely. Thank you again for coming on the show. What are your parting thoughts for our listeners?
Well, Nicholas, I appreciate talking to you. Appreciate the opportunity of being here. And, I as I was saying, I think that this is a really good resource. I hope this is something that maybe the LCMS as a whole can kind of hook on to, because it would be nice, especially for pastors, to be able to hear somebody else talk about, if they've gotten a call to some area, to hear somebody else talk about that area, and give them a lot more to describe. Because a lot of the stuff I kind of had to discover myself, so this way you're getting to hear somebody who's gone out and discovered this stuff. So, I certainly commend this. This is a really great effort on your part, and I hope it turns into something a lot bigger. Look forward to seeing more.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks again for your time. God's peace.
You, sir. You too. Great to talk to you.
Thanks for listening to the Lutheran Cartographer. For more about the things that we talked about today, be sure and check out the show notes page. That'll be at lutherancartographer.com/80. If you want to check out that Audible offer, and I encourage you to do so, you can do that at lutherancartographer.com/audible for that free 30-day trial that comes with a audiobook of your choice, including lots of great things like Pastor Will Wheaton's Thank, Praise, Serve, and Obey. And until next time, I'm Nicholas Weber. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you soon.